Hello everyone. The following video provides an overview on Marjane Satrapi's story, My Speech at West Point. And this story is a story that falls into what is known as the narrative genre. At the core of Satrapi's story, at the core of Satrapi's My Speech at West Point is the essence of a story. It's a personal story, but it's nevertheless a personal story, a narrative, if you will. And the structure, the content and the structure uh, is something I provided or something I reviewed in another video called The Narrative Genre. If you'd like to view that video prior to watching this one, you may do so. Um, and I will nevertheless go over some of these elements. I just won't go over them into the technical detail with which I went through that previous video. So, keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and get into it, and let's view Marjane Satrapi's My Speech at West Point. Her story is taken from the New York Times, in which the website is indicated here for you. And so let's go ahead and review and read Satrapi's My Speech at West Point. My Speech at West Point. When I was invited to speak at West Point, this is how I thought it would be. I'll go to West Point. The major will show me around without saying a word. Then he will shout at me, "You don't smoke here." Then I'll eat with 4,000 cadets in the mess hall. The meal won't be tasty. Pizza, half pepperoni, half cheese. After lunch, I will speak in front of 600 people. I am against the war in Iraq. They will all shout at me again. I will have to continue my speech. Democracy is not a present you give to people by bombing them. Their general will order them to hang me. I will die. So, thinking about the story here, you notice that Satrapi, certainly the last section there, um, she's being slightly humorous, right? But I think she's exaggerating, right? She's hyperbolizing uh, the consequences of giving the speech at West Point, and which makes it slightly humorous, but at the same time, it demonstrates it demonstrates the struggle that she's facing. So let's go ahead and continue, and let's view part two, the second half of this story. But here we are. The major shows me around. Here they play football. You should come and watch a game sometime. Great. Can I smoke? Of course. I eat with 4,000 cadets in the mess hall. The half pepperoni, half cheese pizza is worse than what I thought. After my speech, the cadets come to talk to me. What you said was so inspiring. It's great to discover another point of view. They are lovely and intelligent and much more open-minded than I am. I go back to Manhattan. I know that I don't know anything. That makes my life even more complicated. Later, in my hotel room, 7 American soldiers and 10 Iraqis died today in Baghdad. There's still things I know that I know. I'm against the war, and democracy is not a present you give to people by bombing them. Okay, so let's review the intricacies of the story, right? The composition, the message, and um, noting the three main elements: um, the protagonist and the protagonist context, the goal, and the conflict. Uh, we'll review those first, and then I'll review two more elements: the rising action and the falling action. So the protagonist, of course, is Satrapi. That's very clear. She is the guiding presence in the story. And it should be noted, as we address the context in a little bit, but it should be noted that her nationality, she is French Iranian, probably citing a little bit more on the Iranian side of things, given that being French is more of a Eurocentric Western idea. It's her Iranian nationality or her Iranian side of the nationality that makes the story interesting. So, what's the context? The circumstances. Well, Satrapi receives an invitation to give a speech at the Military Academy of West Point. And this is important. The setting, more than anything, is important because if she were to give this speech, to maybe at a Democratic convention or something of the sort, yeah, I don't think it'd have as much weight. The fact that it's a military academy and West Point is considered kind of the Harvard of the Army, right? Um, it heightens the tension of the speech she's about to give. And so, that said, we already know or we understand her goal, which is to voice a speech against the war in the Middle East, free of conflict, or rather free of the burden or struggle or um, the criticism that might be expected, I shouldn't say stereotypically, but sumptuously, right? If it's a military school, then who is this foreigner to come and give us advice on what to do? And so her goal is to give this speech. I mean, and it's kind of, when you think about it, it's pretty courageous what Satrapi's doing because she is Iranian, and two, she's voicing an expression against the war at West Point. The conflict, and it kind of synchronizes together. The conflict is interesting, right? You'd figured that the conflict might be the soldiers or the antagonism of the soldiers, but I think in this case, if you notice by what the second half of the story demonstrates, uh, it it colors the first half of the story in the sense that the conflict is an internal assumption of that these soldiers are going to be conflictive, right? That these soldiers are going to harass or burden, certainly, voice their criticism of her speech, given the fact that it's the setting is the Military Academy of West Point. So there we have it. So protagonist, Satrapi, the context. She received an invitation to give a speech at West Point. The goal, voice this speech, right, and be able to voice it without any conflict. And the conflict in and of itself is is Satrapi herself. She herself is internalizing an assumption uh, that these soldiers are a threat, that they're going to be antagonistic, that they are, they might even compromise her well-being, so to speak. So so noting these three, uh, the next section, the rising action, this is what occurs between the beginning of the story and at least by measure of the graphic organizer, the Freytag pyramid that I showed at the beginning. Uh, Between the beginning of the story and the height of the conflict is rising action. And this is where Satrapi's facing her conflict. How does she try to overcome it? Well, one of the ways in which she tries to overcome it is she considers the conflictive possibilities of what may occur while visiting West Point. So let's look at this, right? Let's observe. And And so observing here of the visual, right, the visual story here. So here we have Satrapi, and she's conceiving of what the general is going to be like, right? So all this process, all the way up until that humorous, and of course it's, I imagine at that moment it might not have been humorous for Satrapi, but at least for us as readers, we're enjoying this, um, because we know she didn't die, right? But from the beginning of the story to that point, at least, we see how she's dealing with this conflict, and one of the ways in which she's dealing with it, she's predicting, wrongfully, of course, right? But she's having an internal wrongful prediction uh, of what's going to occur, right, or what may possibly occur. Okay, so following the rising action, how does she deal with it? Well, she deals with it by thinking about it, because to begin with, the conflict is also an internal, um, rational conflict, something that's occurring in her mind. And so, the rising action, so to speak, it makes sense that it's also internal, that it's also, a thought process. The next section, the falling action, this is what happens after overcoming the conflict, right? And does she overcome the conflict? Well, she does, right? She does. Maybe not directly, but um, she does overcome it, because it shows. It shows she was able to give her speech and actually receive some praise by many of those soldiers. So what happens thereafter? What happens after she's given the speech? Well, she realizes she was wrong, and we know this, right? We'll look at it in a little bit. She knows she was wrong, and she internalizes how narrow-minded she is. So observe, the beginning. Look at the second row, and there, where the soldiers, they praise her, and the following column there, Satrapi accepts it. She says they are lovely and intelligent and much more open-minded than I am. Right now, this doesn't resolve the conflict of war, but it at least resolves Satrapi's conflict of being able to voice her speech. And that's pretty powerful when you think about it, right? Um, it's powerful because she's reflecting, and she's learning the lesson that, gosh, here I am about to be critical of these soldiers, that they're going to be a threatening entity, only to realize, um, that these soldiers, they're by far much more open-minded than I am. Okay. So that's the falling action. And so does she achieve her goal? She does, right? In an interesting manner, but she does. And the message, to close out, is the fact that in war, no side is necessarily right, and everyone is subject to the cruelties of warfare. So Satrapi, she goes about, putting up a defense and a type of internal mental counter to the possibility of these soldiers being antagonistic against her. But, um, over the course of her experience, she learns she learns the message, right? She learns that they're very open, they're not as conflicting, and so, rather than be against them, maybe realize that in war, they too may be victims, and this is demonstrated in the New York Times piece, where both Iraqis and American soldiers pass away. So that sums it up. I hope this helps you, and thank you.